This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada has been supporting Canadian small business retailers for 25 years. With their up and running program, you can access eBay's 180 plus million buyers in 190 countries around the world. With up and running, there are no listing fees on up to 200 listings per month, and you only pay fees when you sell. As part of the eBay community, you get real-time advice and inspiration and access to powerful selling tools and insights. Go to ebay.ca/up and running, stay local, and sell global.
Welcome to Canada's podcast, the number one podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs.
Hello, this is Robert Smiley coming to you today with Vancouver's podcast, a member of the Canada's Podcast Network, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today's guest, Nancy Wood, was a senior business communications specialist in Toronto for several years. In her rewirement years in BC, she has toiled to transform her business style writing into more creative writing, nonfiction essays, prose, and books for little kids. She has written 5 books for kids, but it was not until an interesting opportunity came her way last year that the first one of her books, The Magical Power of Color, was published. Well, Nancy, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time today to be here for all our listeners.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Robert.
Okay, I want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and give us the details on your current business.
Well, I come originally from Ontario. I was born and raised in Toronto, actually just a little bit west of Toronto. And my life in the business world, where I started out, was in marketing. And I kind of eased over into communications, corporate communications for the most part, because it gave me a chance to do lots of writing. And writing is something that I have just really loved for a long, long time. And so in the business world, I was writing everything from speeches for the presidents to employee benefits plans to crisis communication plans, all very business oriented and somewhat formulaic. I mean, certainly, you want to be creative when you're communicating certain things to a specific audience, but you sort of learn very quickly to write pretty concisely and sort of just the facts, ma'am. So I did that for years, and it was a fantastic career. The one thing I always say to anyone looking at going into communications is that you have to really like to do detailed work, and you have to be totally fine with working on deadlines, because it's so deadline intensive. And so that was kind of the several years of doing that kind of work, writing for others. And I did that on my own for several years. And then I worked at a couple of companies as a full-time employee. And then a move to Vancouver Island about 12 years ago sort of came at a time with early retirement. I was hard-pressed to even use that word retirement because I was relatively young, but my job was moving to the States, and even before Trump times, I didn't have that much interest in actually working and relocating to the US. And so I ended up out on Vancouver Island. So that's when I really started to look at, well, am I going to sort of do the same kinds of things? Am I going to write for business? And I really sort of sat back and thought, I'd really like to take off some of the formality and just learn to write more creatively, write from the heart a little bit, and write about things that I was passionate about. But coming to that realization wasn't sort of an overnight thing. And even if it had been an overnight thing, it's incredibly difficult to make a complete change in style. I used to sometimes think about someone like a Jerry Seinfeld, and we all sort of knew him in his role as a comedian. And if Jerry were to, and maybe he has, played a serious role in a drama, for example, it would be hard in the beginning to sort of, sort of have him be believable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So what I'm trying to say also is that it's difficult to make a big style change if you've been writing for a long, long time in a certain, what I would call business style.
Okay. Now, did you need financing to start your company? And how do you currently make money in the business now?
Well, I make money in the business by selling the books, this particular book that I have just created. And no, I was fortunate that I didn't need financing because the costs were relatively low. My first book has been a self-published book, and it was a bit of a leap to think about self-publishing. I had some hang-ups about self-publishing, not the least of which is how will I ever get my book into the hands of readers? And but I was lucky enough to meet up with a wonderful woman on Vancouver Island. She runs a company called Island Gals Media. Her name is Joanna Sosha, and she was kind of my inspiration and a little bit of a nag. She would say to me, I know you've got children's stories on your computer. Send me some of those. And I said, well, why do you want to read those? She said, just send me. I've got a great idea. So I sent her the 5 stories that are there. And she came back to me and said, I've got an idea. Please just hear me out. And as soon as she talked about self-publishing, I was kind of like, oh, I didn't want to hear that. And anyway, I listened to her and I'm really glad I did.
Okay. What is the long-term vision and what will your company look like in the future? Do you see the company expanding into other areas and where beyond Vancouver Island or even Canada?
Well, that's a great question. My goal is to have my books for children, and I gear toward what they call the preschooler. They're kind of, it's called the picture book format, where you've got maybe 500 to 1,000 words in 24 to 34 pages. And I'm always interested in inspiring kids with the stories that I'm writing and that I tell. And so I would like to think when I dream big, which is what you sort of have to do when you're doing things on your own, I would like to think that my books could be translatable into some different languages, because the stories, I feel, for the most part, should be certainly in the Western world, certainly they should be applicable and understandable and fun for kids throughout the Western world. And so, yeah, so well, the book that's just been published, The Magical Power of Color, it's really to introduce children to not sort of the typical color book, like here's an orange and what color is an orange and here's an apple, and because there's lots of books out there to that effect, and there's lots of fabulous ones. This one is more about how does color affect me? So it tries to open up a child's eyes into the fact that color can make us feel different ways, and that throughout our lifetime, we could be sitting in a room and feel really good about that room, because if we stand back, it can often be the color in the room. So it's trying to introduce, and I use a character of a mouse who's just moved into a new house, and it's kind of ugly brown and it makes her feel really down. In this case, I did a rhyming book, and because I think it works well with kids, and for the adults who are reading and rereading, it's just more fun. If you can rhyme the words, you can ham it up a bit when you're reading to the little kids. So so the kind of feedback I've had on the book is that it really helped kids think about colors in a fun way, but also in the color kind of makes me feel good or makes me feel yucky, So I try and I get inspired by something, and then I'll go out and I'll do a survey and see, well, are there books already written like that? And not to say that space can't allow for more than one book on a topic. But I want to bring something that's different. So in the case of the color, I wanted, kids to think about it's fun and it's okay to like different ones and to feel differently about certain colors. And I also did a little bit of a play, not a play on words, but there's a little thing where the mouse goes to visit her friend and she finds she's green with envy because the friend's house has all these whimsical colors. And so even to get kids thinking about green with envy, or I feel blue, like it's, you think about the way we speak, we use color often to describe our moods, even as adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What are the biggest benefits for you and being an entrepreneur in Vancouver Island? I want you to give us some of the good points about starting a company there, but I also want you to give us some of the tough things or challenges for our listeners so they can keep an eye out for them.
Okay, well, the good points are the Vancouver Island, and I don't know whether it's the demographics because we have a higher proportion of people of retirement age. There are a lot of people who are writing and doing artistic things here. So it's a very supportive community. If you do something, there's a lot of enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm doesn't always translate into money, but people often know other people and they'll say, give me a copy or send me a copy or tell me about yourself and what you're doing and I'll, introduce you to someone else. So there's that nice kind of connectivity. In my case, for example, if I went the more traditional route with children's books, and I tried this with one book that I wrote, the very first book for kids that I wrote about 8 years ago. And the traditional route would be to send your manuscript to children's publishers, but you don't blanket children's publishers or any publisher. I don't know. I'm sure some of your listeners know about book publishing. You send your transcript and you wait to hear back. It's very poor form to blanket and send to, excuse me for a second. Sorry. It's poor form to send to several all at once, several publishers. And so getting back to the point, it's one thing to sometimes I feel like we're way out here and I'm writing back to publishers, or at that time I was writing to publishers in Toronto, New York, and London, England. And sometimes I felt that, I wonder if they just see me as, a provincial person out there. Sometimes I felt away from kind of the big city. So that I've questioned sometimes if would it make any difference if I was in, let's say, back in Toronto, or would it be worthwhile to get on a plane and go have some meetings? Well, you still have to have your manuscript accepted before you could go knocking on a door and say, hey, I'd like to sit down with you and talk about this great book that I'd like to publish. So, occasionally I might have felt that I'm out of the mainstream, but as cliche as it sounds, we're so connected these days through the internet. It's amazing. So that's not as big as a problem as I'm maybe making it out to sound.
Okay. Now, we do some of our best work outside the office. Is there a place on Vancouver Island close to where you live or work where you like to go recharge or get inspired with ideas or just think about your business or even writing? And does it change with the season considering all the rain we get here in BC?
That's funny with the rain. Yes, I have had to get used to the rain, but I just an aside on that, and I guess a convenient connection to the topic of the first book, color. What I love about the rainy season, and I try and tell people, it's so green, it's so colorful, because the greens this time of year are greener than green. And as most of us who've lived here for a while know, that our summertime actually is a time of drought and things get rather brown by July. So I don't mind the rain. But back to your question, I get inspired when I walk out the door and I breathe. There's a freshness of the air on the coast that I find inspiring. And add to that, for example, today I was walking along the coast in Oak Bay, and the mountains, the Olympic Mountains on the US side, were just spectacular. They were snow-capped and the sky was blue and there were lots of early rhododendrons blooming. And it sounds funny, but I can walk like that in that environment and get all re-inspired about, what I'm doing and how I'm going to do it. And so that's one place. And the other place, because I really have an interest in writing for children, even though I do like to write some essays, and it's always fun to get something published in, like, the Globe and Mail, for example. That was fun. I have a couple of grandchildren now, and I find when I'm hanging with them, they do things or they ask questions that get my mind going in a way where I think, oh, I wonder how I could say that in a story that would help other kids understand. Or here's just an example of, I went to listen to a talk that was hosted by Tanya Miller. I don't know if that name rings a bell with you, but she was the conductor of the Victoria Symphony for 10 or 12 years. Young, dynamic woman, and she ended her tenure, I guess, about 2 years ago. Anyway, toward the end of that, there was a fundraising evening where she was talking to young women, trying to inspire them in their, as they looked forward to their careers, about how she'd become a conductor. And I was just completely inspired by her. And I went right home and I wrote a story for kids all based on Tanya's life. And, she had wanted to be a concert pianist, and something happened physically to her hands. And her dream was kind of closed down very early on, maybe in her 20s. And so the next best thing for her was to become a conductor. And there weren't many women as conductors. She didn't have a lot of role models. Anyway, getting back to my inspiration, that story just came out of me quickly. And then the next day I contacted her. I didn't know her personally, but that's part of being an entrepreneur. You have to, take the courageous, you have to make the courageous calls and emails and whatever. And I asked her if I could send her something that I'd written. And I said, would it be possible? How would you feel if I were to publish that story? And she said, you've got my blessing. And so it's one of the ones that sits in the vault, so to speak. But that's where I get my inspiration. It can come in many different places, because I think, oh, what a powerful story that would be for a young kid, because her life was really neat, and she grew up in a really interesting place called Foam Lake, I believe in, oh dear, it was Manitoba or Saskatchewan, I should know, but who knew of Foam Lake? Think of the fun you can have about Foam Lake, So anyway, my inspiration comes in just everyday life.
This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada is powering Canadian small businesses. Go to ebay.ca/up and running to open your new global e-commerce business.
Do you think entrepreneurs have to be weird or unique in a positive way, or are wired differently?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think they're wired differently. It's a huge general statement, but just in terms of thinking a little bit more outside of the norm. And so, if an entrepreneur might be thinking about something, let's say I'm thinking about something and I think, oh, I could never contact that person or whatever. As an entrepreneur, you just have to go ahead and do it. Like you have to kind of get over that part and just go do it. In my case, it's always easier with the written word. To make a phone call to someone is really difficult if I haven't, to make a sort of what I would call a cold phone call. But yes, I think that entrepreneurs have to be prepared to think differently and maybe not just always follow the rule book, like, oh, I shouldn't do that. Maybe that's a bit forward or a bit rude or whatever. So yes, I think there could be some different wiring. I think entrepreneurs, and by the way, when I compare myself to some of the guests you've had on the show, or I just watched a feature of Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. I mean, those are entrepreneurs of a completely different magnitude. So I don't put myself in that same category, but I think if you look at an entrepreneur as being someone who's looking to fill a need, that's sort of how I look at it. So if I'm approaching that with writing a book or writing an article, I say, well, that's, as far as I know, that hasn't been written before, or that angle hasn't been taken. And so if it's someone, an entrepreneur with a product they're taking to market, or a product they're going to develop, like today I saw in a store, I saw a sock, a wool sock made in Canada. It's a little sockette, and it was in the fruit department beside the avocados, and it was an avocado sock. Now, for all I know, you've probably interviewed that person who invented the avocado sock. And I just got the biggest, giggle out of it, because I thought that is really cool, and it's guaranteed to ripen that hard avocado within a day and have it ready or whatever. Of course you could use your sock at home, some clean sock, but the fact they made these really cute, really cool socks and had some very enticing copy on them. I love it when people are creative with their copy. And I thought that's really entrepreneurial to sort of know that everyone's, had that thing where they brought home an avocado and they really wanted it for tomorrow, but it's hard as a rock. And so anyway, there's a very long-winded answer, but
Okay.
yeah.
If you weren't doing what you do now as an author, what would you like to do for a profession?
I would like to act. I did amateur theater in high school and in my early 20s, when, it was much easier to work all day and then go memorize lines at night and do some local theater. And it's always something that I feel I haven't quite developed. And I'm not sure. I think that time is, it's a little bit age sensitive. So that ship may have sailed, but I'm answering your question very honestly.
Okay. What kind of a job would you not like to do?
Oh, there are many. I would have a very hard time doing sort of a bookkeeping, accounting job. That would just not be good for me. And I would not like to lead mountain expeditions, hiking expeditions. I like to hike, but not up high mountains. So that wouldn't be for me.
Okay. In business, what is your favorite word, quote, or sentence that you like to use?
In business, my favorite quote is never give up.
Okay. It's pretty well self-explanatory. What is your least favorite word or sentence you do not like to hear?
A term I absolutely can't stand because it's overused and I just have never really liked it from the beginning is reaching out. And a lot of people who might be listening might just roll their eyes and say, what's her problem? I just don't like, I see so many emails. Hi, I'm just reaching out to you. No, just hi. How are you? Like, I'm reaching out. I think it's one of those overused expressions. And, you can look at every few years, there's always one that gets used and used. Another one these days is curate. I don't know, maybe because I am in the writing business. I start to spot something and I think, oh my goodness, the word is just being used all the time and not necessarily always in the best way, and it's just being overused. So
Okay.
Reaching out and curating, I think we should move on to new words.
Okay. If you had to pick one or two words to describe yourself, what would it be and why?
I'm resourceful, and I'm tenacious. So it's a bit of a joke with some of my friends that if you need to find out something like, about the island, let's say, or about traveling somewhere, I just love getting on the computer and researching, and I get a real kick out of that. I really do love to do that. And I am tenacious. They'll stick to it if I'm interested. And the other thing is that friends would know, people would know about me, I'm a little bit fanatic about customer service. And so any time in my life where customer service was involved, which was pretty much all the time, I really like to give good customer service. And in turn, I kind of expect it. And I'll I think nothing about writing if I think, a company needs to kind of review something. So, and I've had pretty good success at it. And I'm not talking about just being, a grumpy old consumer, but if I take issue if something is, if it's just misrepresented or whatever. I think people should be treated well, all customers. And so I'm a bit of a fanatic about that.
Okay, what keeps you up at night, if anything?
Ah, what keeps me up at night? Yeah, I think one thing, this doesn't necessarily keep me up at night, but I am disheartened by, on one hand, I've just told you how much I love the access that we have, to the whole world through our connectivity on the internet and so on. But I'm really disheartened by the level of discourse that's going on, and that I hope that we can find a way to become a little bit more civilized, or to make sure that people can't really say things online unless they're prepared. They can't hide behind some assumed name. Now, that wouldn't stop still a lot of people who have no problem, using their name and saying what they have to say. But I still sit back sometimes and try and imagine if that same group of people were sitting in a room face to face, would they mouth off the same way that they do on the internet? And that worries me a little bit, thinking forward, like thinking, how could something so good become so vicious in certain ways? And I think about the little kiddies coming along, and how are they going to manage that? So I do give a lot of thought to these tools that have liberated us, that we can work anywhere in the world, anytime. I hope the little kids don't just sort of have memories. As my daughter said to me the other day, I don't want my little boys, her little boys that is, to just have a memory of every time they looked up, their parents were like looking down at their phones, And I was aware of that the other day. I took one of the little guys to a little gymnastics class, and a couple of times he looked over at me, and I was sort of, I caught the tail end of the look because I was looking down at my phone and doing something. And so I just put it in my pocket. I'm as addicted as the next person, but I do give a lot of thought to where's this all going,
Okay. I want you to give us the top 3 things on your inspired life list. This can be a bucket list of any sort, whether you want to do a TEDx talk, travel more, write more books, philanthropy, anything like that.
I would like to write more books and get out and actually read them to children, like not just my own grandchildren and their friends, but I'd actually like to get out and read them to kids. I would love to do a TED talk. Haven't quite figured out what the topic would be. And getting back to the acting, I think I'd like to do one play. So I think, even though I mostly shut that door, I might just open it a little bit more.
See where it goes. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have any advice that you may have received that you can pass on to entrepreneurs throughout British Columbia?
Oh, just know that the world is our market. BC and the people here, I think, are well viewed across the world as being sort of a creative mixture of people, and that live in this quite inspiring part of the world, the geography, in spite of the rain, just a very inspiring place to live. And just keep dreaming and put those dreams into action. That's like, don't give up, and just keep on going.
Okay. Nancy, are you ready to have some fun?
I am.
Okay, great.
This has been fun, though. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it's about to get a lot funner. So Here
Oh.
we go. As you know, entrepreneurs are very busy people. We're always connected. We're always online, emails, chats, you name it. We're always in touch. We're going to take you away from all that. There's a small tropical island just off of Fiji that only has one phone booth there. There is no internet. This place does exist. We're going to drop you off there. You won't have a computer, a smartphone, or a tablet. You can use the phone booth located there anytime to call the boat. We'll come pick you up. How long would you last before you made that call? What would you do while you were there?
Oh, now you're going to get at the chicken side of me. Well, because it's Fiji, the first thing I would do is get in the water. I love water, and I know the water around Fiji would be really warm. And I know I'd find a place where I could see what's at the bottom, so I could kind of be looking for the beautiful things and the kind of not so nice things. And then I'd get nice and warm in the sun a bit, and I'd watch that sunset. And I'd probably watch the stars come out, but I think I'd be making the call when it got dark. I
Okay.
just am not the best alone in the dark.
Okay. So
But I'd be so grateful for that day alone on the beach. I really would. Not just
drop you off in the morning and dinner time will come get you.
sort of dull, huh?
That's okay. It's just where your comfort zone is and what you want to feel you can do. But it'd probably be a beautiful day and make the most of it, right? So
Well, and I hope I'd come back with a story,
there
like
you go.
any old story for kids or adults or whatever. I'm sure I
Or
would.
an idea for a new book.
But there you go. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap things up. How can our listeners get hold of you? And is there anything you'd like to add before you leave us today?
Well, listeners can get hold of me through my website, nancyseegerwood.com. That's NancySeager.com. And I would just like to congratulate you, Robert, for what you're doing, because the podcasts are inspiring and you're helping to get the stories coming from British Columbia out to the rest of Canada. And that is wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing. And thanks to all the entrepreneurs who are doing great things that I had no idea how many fantastic things were going on in our province. So
yes, there's a lot. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, everything from tech to great authors like you to yoga studios, you name it, right across the board. Cereal companies, shoe companies, we've had them all online. So
I know it makes you pretty proud to be from BC, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
So thank you. I just feel really honored to have had the invitation to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay. Thanks for coming on the show. I've learned a lot about you, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.
Thanks, Robert.
See you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada is here to help. They've been supporting Canadian small business retailers for 25 years, and their up and running program is getting Canadian businesses online today. Visit ebay.ca/up and running. Stay local and sell global with eBay.